Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me give me a yes, you can hear me. Yes, you can see me in the chat if you would please. Just checking, double checking. So I'm waiting to see somebody give me a yes. We're good to go. All right, very good. Excellent. Well, hello, sewing friends, friends of Let's Go Sew, and very importantly, friends of Sewing Machines Plus, also known as SMP Nation. I want to hear a big cheer for SMP Nation. Thank you so much, Sewing Machines Plus, for again allowing me to take over your page. My goal here is very, very, very simple. If you know me, you probably have heard me say this before, but a little introduction. I am Joanne Banco from letsgosew.com, and my mission is very simply to help you make the most of your machines. That is it. That is my sole purpose. And if I can achieve that, I feel that I can lay my head on the pillow at night and sleep soundly. And hopefully, that makes your sewing space a happier place to create. So, love it if you would give me the comments that at the end, if that does work for you. I would love to see you comment below the YouTube video, even if it's just a couple words. And then I am going to ask you to like and share this, please. That makes a big difference for me, and it makes a big difference for Sewing Machines Plus, and also for the rest of the creative world out there. Because the more we share good things, the more we all keep sewing going. All right. And then be sure to give that thumbs up on the like button. Okay. So I'm off my soapbox now. And I have got some great, great things to share with you today. So we are once again rolling down the Serger road. Okay. I'm expecting that a lot of you are here because you already know we are involved in a series of sensational serger stitching. And it's a specialty that I love, love, love to teach more about, because I feel that in many ways it's something that a lot of creatives kind of get stuck on. So I don't want you to be stuck in serger limbo. I want you to be rolling along and using your serger to the absolute fullest. So hello, everybody. I see lots and lots of friends coming in. You know, we don't have time to give everybody a shout out, so I'll just send a big kiss to all of you. Thank you so very much for being here. Today's topic is two-thread tricks and techniques. So if you've been following along, and I definitely encourage you to go back and watch previous Takeover Tuesdays that I've done. Obviously, we've got a great team here. We've got Becky Thompson, who would normally be here today. So we swapped out our days this month. We've got Jane Klaus, and we've got Carly Bell, and everybody is sharing a whole lot of different things here to get your sewing going. So make sure you watch all the shows. But if you go back to the very beginning, I started this whole series with the serger. I am using the Brother Airflow 3000, and a little birdie told me that we may have a really great price for you today. So I only recommend things that I personally know and love. So you can rest assured that's another reason I can lay my head on the pillow at night and rest comfortably, because I am not going to share anything with you that I have not given my stamp of approval to. So be confident in that. Obviously, you know, there's a learning curve for everything, and it does take time and a little bit of patience and practice to master your machines, but I'm here to help you, and I'm here to help you now, and I'm here to help you in the future. So if you ever need to get a hold of me, let's go sew. Let's go sew.com is where you find me. All right. I see many of you here are ready to surge and looking forward to learning more. So again, I'm featuring the Brother Airflow 3000. However, if you have a machine that does a 2-thread stitch, because we're focusing on 2-thread in the last session and this session, then you can repeat these techniques. You just need to find out, the way that your machine is set up, and dig into that just a little bit. But the basics are going to be pretty much the same. So no worries on that as well. All right. I see so many great friends here. And I'm going to answer one question real quick. And then I'm going to ask you if you could maybe hold the rest of your questions. Because, for some dumb reason, I forgot to set up my other screen so that I could see you comment as I'm over at the machine. I don't know. There's always something that you forget. I should have had 2 cups of coffee instead of 1 this morning. So if you could hold your questions till the end, I will definitely leave time to answer them. But I do see a couple here right now, so I'll answer those really quick. So Ann Philback wants to know, is the 1800 like the 3000? Yes, Brother makes an Airflow 1800, and it is very, very, very much the same machine. It just that the Airflow 3000 comes with some different accessories. So usually when you add up the package price for the 3000 with the 3 extra feet that are already included, you're getting a savings as to if you purchase the 1800 and then added on those feet. But absolutely, there's a budget for everyone. And if you're looking to purchase a machine that is virtually identical, but in a little lower cost range, then definitely look at Sewing Machines Plus for the Airflow 1800. Great, great, great machine. And Linda says she has a Celebrate. Do I need to just buy a cover stitch machine or Triumph? Okay, so I am only familiar in my actual, stitching world with Brother, because I've been associated with Brother for so long. So I don't know exactly what the features are on the Celebrate or the Triumph, Linda. Unfortunately, I can't answer that specifically, but I will address just the little thought of serger versus cover machine. Okay, so they are not equal, they are separate. However, some models combine them together. Okay, so hopefully I didn't make that clear as mud, but in the world of machines that are in the serger world or the cover hem world, the basic thing that differentiates, 50-cent word for the day, that separates the two when we're talking about how they operate, is a serger is all about stitching on edges. So just remember that. A cover stitch or cover hem, but a cover stitch on a cover hem machine, or a serger that's combined with cover hem capabilities. Cover hem means you are top stitching. Okay, so just remember, it's either all about the edge or all about stitching on top. So some people prefer to have one machine that is all wrapped up together, a cover hem and a serger that are combined, and then you have different setup for the different machine that you or for the different stitches that you want to execute. Other people like to have a separate serger. So when I talk serger, when I'm talking about just a serger, I'm talking about a basic or standard serger. Basic's kind of a, maybe not a great term, because basic could mean low end. I don't really mean low end. I just mean general ordinary serger. Most will stitch with 2 threads, 3 threads, or 4 threads. Again, all of those stitches would be somehow on an edge. A cover hem can be all over the map and is a whole different topic, but sometimes people prefer to have those separated as 2 different machines. So they can always have one set up to do everything on the edge and the other one set up to do everything as a top stitch. Okay. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if that makes sense. Okay. There's a lot of, and a 2 thread could be, a cover hem could stitch with 2 threads. But again, we're talking about a standard serger today, not a cover hem. So two different issues. Okay. So in my preference, I like to have them separate. I like to have a serger that I'm going to do all of my edge stitching on, and a cover hem that I'm going to do all of my top stitching on, because I can have one basically set up to do all those things and then another one basically set up to do all those things. Okay, looks like I made sense. All right. Yes, and Anne says she prefers 2 separate. It's all about your particular preference and your particular sewing space. So isn't that the beautiful thing in the serger and the sewing world today and the embroidery world, is that there are many options. Cindy, we'll see on doing a cover hem machine soon. Never say never, but I will tell you that in my world, I tend to use my serger more than I tend to use my cover hem machine. And if you're doing a lot of garments and a lot of hemming, and you want to imitate ready to wear, then certainly the cover hem is something you want to consider. Okay. All right. Yeah. Anne says she's too lazy to rethread. That's the whole deal with a cover hem. It's really 2 different things, and you're having to learn another whole set of stitches. So I want to try to keep things, a little bit consistent, so we tackle one thing at a time. Many of us are famous for multitasking. And they say multitasking is highly overrated, because you tend to do one thing good and another thing not so good. So let's try to keep it on the straight and narrow. Creative Appliques, my friend Dawn from Creative Appliques says, do you think it's better to have 2 separate machines? Personally, I prefer 2 separate machines. I have had both, and I find that when I have to do both, I do less of everything, because time is the factor. And it's not the fact that I don't know how to do it. It's just the time stops me, and then I find a faster way to do it. So hopefully that helps. All right. So I'm going to share my screen really quick here, just for a minute. Kyle, I don't know if you need to. There we go. All right. So this is something that I have prepared for you. I have used this in classes, and I hope that you will find it useful. It's going to be my bonus for you today. So if you are on my email list, I will be sending out a link tomorrow. How do you get on my email list? You go to www.letsgosew.com. I will send out a link for you to be able to download a blank version it'll be a version of this sheet that you can fill in yourself. And I highly recommend that when you are practicing these tricks and techniques, that you keep a record for yourself. So this sheet can be put into a plastic sleeve and kept in a notebook. You'll see in a minute that I have a sample already prepared for you. And it basically covers everything you're going to need to set up, make settings or adjustments on your serger when you're preparing specific stitches. So Nancy says she loves my emails. Thank you, Nancy. I do send out an email every Saturday. usually over the weekend, sometime over the weekend, to my all my friends. And I love being able to communicate with you. But tomorrow I will be sending out a special link for this with a replay to this show in a previous show that I did. And you will be able to download this and complete it yourself. So again, you're going to see me do some sample making today, and I would highly recommend when you do your own, you print off a separate sheet for each one that you're doing. And the way I usually do it is I scribble in and fill in all the blanks, and then I go to my computer and I actually type it in. Up to you. I have terrible handwriting. I'm the first one to admit it. And no matter how hard I try, I don't seem to get much better at it. And I hate looking at my own handwriting because it bothers me that it's so bad. So I prefer to type. So I will type that, and then I can also store that in my computer. So if you prefer, you can do this paperless. You could take a picture of your sample and then attach it to your copy there and keep a digital copy. So it's up to you how you want to store that. You may want to do a little bit of both. Okay. Nancy, you are my friend. She says she loves that I call us her friends. You are my friends. I have friends both near and far. And although I don't get to see your faces all the time, seeing your names makes me feel like we are definitely connected. And I love that. All right, so just a little explanation on the sheet. I recommend that you write down the make and model of your serger. Now, if you only have one serger or you only have one machine, and by the way, you could do this for your cover hem machine as well. If you only have one, then it's not so important. But the reason I still recommend that you do that is when maybe someday change out that machine, you want to be able to see what were you working with. So definitely record that. Then describe the technique in your own words, in your own best way. We're going to do a handful of techniques today, and you may want to, get right to it and copy sheets for that, and do your own sample making for each one of the techniques that we do today. That would give you a great, great, great start. Then you definitely want to record what the fabric was. How many times we look at something and we go, I don't know, what was this? Okay. You may even want to record where you got it at. I'll tell you a funny little story. We all do goofy things at times, but I had some sample fabric that I bought a whole bolt of. And when I was getting near the end, I went shopping for more of it. And I kept going to the same store that I was 100% sure that I got it from. And there was a very kind gentleman there. He's a veteran and somebody that deserves our respect. And so I trusted him completely. But I kept saying, I know I bought this here. I'm looking for more. And he'd look at it and go, we don't carry that. We never have carried that. So I found out later when I went to another store, there it was. So if I would have recorded the store that I purchased it at, that may have made it easier for me to find it again. So that's another one for you. The next thing is, what thread did you use? Now I'll give you a little sneak preview. Next time we are going to be talking alternative and extraordinary threads. So if you have ever wanted to play around on your serger with specialty threads, make sure you show up for the May show and we will be covering that. But you want to record what thread. If it's just standard serger thread, fine. But I would even recommend that you record the brand. Why am I being so specific on this? Okay, so is everybody? You should still see me in the lower corner. So I've seen a couple comments on here. Let me know if you are seeing me in the lower corner and you're seeing my sheet on the screen, because I got a few more things to explain on this. Okay, so brand of thread makes a difference. I am a big fan of Maxi-Lock serger thread for my basic, standard, ordinary serger thread. Okay, I'm getting some yeses. So if you're not, then it means it's something on your end, and you may want to uh, check that and see where you're at. But there's usually a little piece of me in the corner there. All right, Maxi Lock. Why do I love Maxi Lock? Because it's affordable and it's consistent quality. If you have ever purchased some off brands of sergers, and again, I have a story for everything. Hopefully you you enjoy my stories, but they illustrate a point. I was in a dealership for many years where I sold machines and trained people on how to use them. And of course, we took repairs in there, and a lady brought in her serger, and she had it completely overhauled. When it left the store, it was purring like a kitten. She came back a few days later and she was throwing fits because her serger was throwing fits. And we saw that she had put on very inferior, poor quality thread. And we switched that back to MaxiLock, and the machine purred like a kitten again. We did nothing else to that machine. We made no adjustments. All we did was change the thread. So quality of your thread makes a big, big difference. MaxiLock, again, is affordable, and you can find it on SewingMachinesPlus.com. And it comes in lots of different colors, and yeah, we want to purr like a kitten. Absolutely. All right. So then, very simply on a serger, again, a standard serger, we have a left needle, we have a right needle, we have an upper looper, and we have a lower looper. So I'm going to record what I am putting in each one of those places as far as thread. So if I don't put anything in there, I just put N/A, which means not applicable. I think that's what that means. We've just gotten used to the little short thing of it. And then I'm going to record the stitch length. And if you vary it a little bit, go ahead and you can add that to your notes. You'll see notes is at the bottom. Record your stitch width setting, which is done by the dial on your machine. Remember that what stitch width does is it moves the stitch finger away from the needle or closer to the needle. And as it does that, it also moves the cutting blade. So the further that stitch finger is and the further the cutting blade is from the needle you are using, the wider your stitch will be. The closer that stitch finger is and the cutting blade is, the narrower your stitch will be. Your machine will have an average. On my Brother Airflow 3000, the average is 5, but that can be tweaked a little bit for fabrics and for threads. Another topic we'll cover in the future as far as that goes. But then you have differential feed. Differential feed, I'll just reiterate what differential feed does. Differential feed on a serger, and I remember the day when we had some that had it and some that didn't. I think every serger has it today, but you can tell right away if you look at your feed dogs. You have 2 separate feed dogs when you have differential feed. You have a front set of feed dogs and a back set of feed dogs. And when you have the differential feed dial set on 1, it means they are working in a 1-to-1 ratio as if they were one feed dog unit. Very easy to remember. 1 means it's like 1 unit. When you change your differential feed dial to a higher number, that we call that the positive end, your front feed dogs are moving a little faster than your back feed dogs are. So they're pushing fabric as you stitch, and that can actually help ease the fabric when you're sewing on stretchy fabrics that would stretch out of shape. In another case, it can actually create gathers, and we'll be doing gathers. We've got decorative threads to do, and then we've got serger feet to do. So we've got at least 2 more sessions that we will be covering in depth. And I'd love to hear your feedback. Do you prefer? I want you to make the most of your machine. So give me some input on this, and I always read your comments at the end if I can't get them all at once. But do you prefer to do a few things in detail and tackle things one at a time? Or do you prefer to just have a whole lot of things thrown at you and then try to sort it out in the end? I have a feeling I know what the answer is. Marcia wants to know why the width knob has double the numbers. Marcia, I'm not really sure what you mean by double. Just remember that the lower number brings the finger and the cutter blade closer to the needle, so that means it's more narrow. The higher number takes it further away and makes a wider stitch. So very simple. The more adjustment you have on your cutting width dial, the better off you are, because there is tweaking involved. Okay, Jana, you prefer multiple things going on so you could task in batches. Yeah, I understand that, but I'm talking more about as far as learning a few things at a time rather than a whole bunch of things that might be inspiring. I could pull out of my sample pack tons of samples that I think would inspire you. But at the end of the day, I want you to be able to repeat those techniques on your own machines. Remember, it's all about helping you master your machines and make the most of it. All right. So then differential feed also has a negative setting. Negative setting means that your fabric gets stretched because the front feed dogs are moving a little slower than the back feed dogs. So they're actually creating a pulling action, or taut sewing and taut serging. Why would we use that? Well, we could do a whole thing on differential feed, and I will put that in the plan. But when we stretch the fabric, it's usually because that fabric has a tendency to pucker up a little bit, maybe on woven synthetics. We also might do the stretching because we want to purposefully ripple the edge of our fabric like we would in lettuce edging. And Dora says, does she mean the numbers that represent? I don't think she finished her statement. So hopefully I explained that as far as like what the numbers mean on that cutting width dial or stitch width dial, because it basically it's the same thing wrapped up into one. All right, other settings, whatever you feel is important to your machine. In the case of this particular sample, I am using the blade up, which means the blade is cutting. It's doing its cutting action, but you'll see when I get over to the machine in a minute here that it may or may not be cutting in relation to where I run the fabric, and you'll see what I mean there. Left and right needle spacing. Remember, left and right needle spacing. Thank you, Doris, for saying that. That makes a difference. So again, that cutting width dial and that number on that cutting width dial is relative to what needle you have in the machine. When you have a left needle in the machine, you have a wider stitch. When you have a right needle in the machine, you have a narrower stitch. Plain and simple. Okay. All right. All right. Hopefully that helps. Let's see. Then the final thing is notes. Whatever, again, that you find is important. If this is like a technique that you did that you love, we all forget what we did later on, and we don't even, especially if you're involved in lots of creations. So you might want to put a big heart. I loved this technique, or this was perfect for my grandson's bike cover project, or whatever you did. Make a note of that, and then when you look at it in the future down the road, it's all there for you. So I've really gotten into, I've always recorded everything pretty much that I've done, documented it, because so much of what I've done is out there in the public, either on my website or somewhere else out there on the internet. And so I'm always all about that. But when I was just sewing for fun and not for the purpose of helping others necessarily, I didn't document so much. And I find then I look back at something and I wonder, what in the world I did, and then I have to learn it myself all over again. All right. Okay, so I am ready to take that down, and I'm going to show you my finished page really quick because I think it's easier for me to show it to you here. So there you see what I've done. That is the exact same page that I showed you. And technique-wise, what I have here is plainly and simply, the 2-thread stitch used as overcasting. And again, if you check back in last month's session, we talked about how the 2-thread stitch, because we're focusing on 2 threads, is more appropriately called an overcast and not an overlock, because it does not lock at the needle line. So it's not something we would use for a traditional serger seam. So I explained all that last time, so you can look that up. But this is something that I used for this particular sample, just as an edge finish. And another little thing that I recommend, if you see what I did here, I'll hold that really close. I stitched one side with the top side facing up, and I stitched the opposite side with the bottom facing up. So again, if you need to label that, you can very easily use your, permanent marker and write on there that this was the upper side of the fabric and this was the lower side of the fabric. And what I have here is a perfectly balanced 2-thread overcast stitch, a stitch that I would likely use for clean finishing raw edges on a seam that I maybe sewed on my regular sewing machine, and now I want to press open. So I didn't need my serger to lock at the seam line. I used my sewing machine for that, but I want to clean finish those edges. Or very commonly, we may be using this as a clean finish before we turn up a hem. All right. But you will see we are going to do other things with this same stitch, just maybe tweaking the settings a little bit and the actual technique. Okay. All right. I am so excited to show you all of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the machine. I've got everything all lined up for you. So let me do that. And there we go there. So again, I'm going to rely on you to give me a second here and tell me if you can see that as well. And Anne, I see you're taking notes and you will be watching again. Yeah, definitely taking those notes helps a lot, but it's wonderful to be able to watch on a replay and refresh your memory that way. And then it's also a nice idea to just go ahead and stitch along and recreate what I'm creating step by step by just hitting that great little pause button and going forward piece by piece. Okay, so I will tell you, it's always a little hard to hit all of the angles. I wanted you to be able to see as close as possible, so that's where we're going there. All right, I have got my serger set up. And I'm not going to take the time to show you the setup because we have done that in the past. And there's been lots of videos showing you how to thread this machine. But I have got it threaded currently with the left needle. The right needle is gone. And I have got my lower looper threaded. Okay, so my lower looper is actually right here. Remember, I'm going to refresh a couple of things. So pardon me for repetition, but we have 2 loopers on the serger. We have an upper looper and a lower looper. And I nicknamed the upper looper the dolphin looper because that's the one that goes up and down. And to me, it looks like a dolphin jumping out of the water and then going back down. The lower looper never jumps, So I don't know what fish don't jump, but that would be the fish that never jumps. It always stays below the throat plate. So when you do a 2-thread stitch, you are going to be setting up the machine so that you're stitching with one needle and one looper, and that looper will be always will be the lower looper. The upper looper gets, for the best word is disengaged. So there is an upper looper converter that either clips onto your machine, or in the case of the Airflow 3000, I love, love, love this fact, the way they designed it. It's always there. All I need to do is swing it in place and then make sure that it is directly in the hole of the upper looper. And so what it's doing is it's stopping the dolphin from having any effect. So that upper looper is no longer in play, and it configures the stitch so that it catches the needle and the lower looper only. Okay, so if you have any questions on that, save them for when we get back. All right, now the first thing I'm going to show you is just a little repeat again of the sample, and hopefully this will clarify a couple of those questions. When I did this 2-thread overcasting stitch on my right side here where my thumb is pressing, that was done with the left needle. So there's what it looks like on the top side, or the the right side as it's facing. That's what it looks like on the wrong side. And again, just to um, refresh your memory, when you do a 2-thread balanced stitch on the upper side, it looks like it's locking at the seam line, which is where the needle is. But when you flip it over, you look and you see that this is actually the needle thread, and the needle thread does not lock at the seam line. So it's just simply overcasting. It does lock at the raw edge, but it doesn't lock at the seam line. And then on the opposite side, all I did in this particular case was switch to my right needle. Another little tip of the day: if you are using just one needle, always, 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 always remove the needle that you are not using. So don't leave it in there. Even if it's unthreaded, it's going to mess up your stitches. So always remove that needle. And by the way, I highly recommend that you get yourself a needle inserter tool if you don't already have one. I'm not going to demo it going in and out, but I'm just going to show you. It has a hole so that you can feed your needle right in there, and it allows you to hold that needle and push it all the way up while you are tightening your screw, or while you are loosening the screw to remove the needle. So I, in the past, did not use this, and I was sorry that I didn't. If you watched one of my videos, I struggled with getting that needle in because I couldn't see close enough. But if I would have had that needle inserter tool, that would have helped a lot. So that is also something you will find on SewingMachinesPlus.com. Look for Serger needle inserter tool. All right, so again, all I've done here is switch to the right needle, and I got a very narrow stitch. So your personal preference and whatever fits your project. Do you want wide or do you want narrow? Remember that the wider your serger stitch is, so when you're using that left needle, you always have more coverage on the raw edge. And let's see, do I have a piece of that fabric before it was used? I don't think so. Trust me, this ravels like crazy. So if I really want that to be secured, I'm probably going to use the wide version. But if I want it to be a little bit more delicate, or I'm working with more narrow seam allowances, then that right needle will give me a really, really nice narrow stitch. All right. First thing we're going to do is set this up tension-wise to stitch this beautiful balanced stitch. This is perfect. Every thread is where it needs to go. So I'm going to start out imperfect and allow you to see how I perfect this. Now, when you set up for a particular stitch, your manual is going to give you a guideline. And for my particular machine, in the manual, it says if you're doing a 2-thread overcasting or over, they call it overlocking. I'm going to call it overcasting. If you're doing a 2-thread stitch, your left needle would be anywhere from 1 to 3, and your right needle would be anywhere from 5 to 7. Now, if you looked at my sheet, you would see that I ended up with a completely different tension setting, but I want to start out wrong and then show you how you make it right. First thing you always want to remember when you are testing your stitches is to start with a long strip of fabric. It's especially important. How long is long? Well, it depends, but it's especially important when you're working with decorative threads, which we'll do next time. But when you're working with decorative threads, just remember that every time you start and every time you stop, you have to leave a chain of thread. Usually that's about 3 inches long. Well, 3 inches plus 3 inches plus 3 inches plus 3 inches adds up. And when you're working with specialty decorative threads, they tend to have less yardage on a spool than your standard serger thread does. So it's one of those waste not, want not things. And if you use a long strip, the longer the better when you're working with decorative threads, you can serge a little, look at it, tweak it, serge a little, look at it, tweak it. So you're not going to be wasting all of that thread at the beginning, at the end. I don't really care for what I'm using today, but I'm just working with a medium weight fabric. I've got my standard serger foot on. I am going to switch in a couple minutes here to another foot, and I'm going to go ahead and put it to the standard cutting setting, and I'm going to trim off a little fabric. I love the way my machine here, the airflow, is designed to have this little thing, little doohickey, little thingamajig that juts out from the toe of the foot. And I know that whenever I guide my fabric along with the raw edge of my fabric lined up with that little doohickey that's sticking out, it means that I'm going to be trimming a little bit of fabric. And just remember, in the world of serging, you almost always get a little bit better stitch quality if you're at least skimming or trimming that fabric. It's all about the alignment. So that helps me just trim a little bit. Of course, you could trim less. There's another little line on my serger right here. It's like a little groove. And I found that sometimes that will be the line that I will follow to just barely skim. And remember, it's also allowing you to have those, have that trim evenly. Now, I want to just give you a little heads up. I have removed my scrap catcher, my little garbage bin that normally snaps on underneath there, because it gets in my way when I'm demonstrating. And then I will also tell you that this serger comes with a it comes as an option usually, a wonderful extension table that makes this whole bed area much wider. And if you're doing garments, that makes a big difference. All right, so I'm going to take a look at this and I'm going to see, oh, I'm a little bit off. Now I'm going to tell you that I know I have both of them off, but I'm going to tell you I'm going to change one thing at a time. And this, if we went through a whole series of adjusting your serger, I'm going to tell you a couple things. First of all, this does not have automatic tension. That does not bother me a bit, because I find that the tension system on this machine is such high quality that it needs very little adjustment. Yes, there are machines out there that are totally automatic. For me personally, I like being able to tweak it, and you'll learn a little bit more about that next time when we talk about decorative threads. If you're just doing kind of ordinary, your auto tension is probably going to work fine for you. But if you want to stitch outside the box a little bit, the more ability you have to manually adjust your machine, in my opinion, the better chance you have for perfecting that stitch. Okay. All right. So I'm looking at this and I know one thing for sure. My needle thread, which is red, should be going all the way to the edge, because when I showed you my sample, remember, here's my ideal here, and my needle thread should be going all the way to the edge, and it should form a V when we're doing a 2-thread stitch. I am not getting a V, I'm getting a little dot. So I currently have my needle set at 3, and my recommendation was anywhere from 1 to 3. So I'm going to do 2. Stitch a little bit and show you how 2 makes a difference. Oh, there I can see it's getting better, but it's still not good enough. So let's go down to 1. Do a little more. Ah, I'm getting better again, but I know from my sample, even though my recommendation was 1 to 3, I ended up going all the way to 0. So doesn't mean your recommendation is wrong. It just means that it may be different when you're doing it. All right, so I can see that I'm almost there. Now, there are 2 threads here that I'm using. So if I can't loosen my upper looper, my needle anymore, then I should be looking at, oh, wait a minute. I had a 5 to 7 range on that lower looper. What would happen if I went higher than 5, which is currently where I'm on? And so we're going to go to 6. And we look, and we're nearly perfect there, but I could switch that, tweak that just a little bit more. So I found that I went all the way up to 7. So I had a setting of 0 and 7. Remember, your fabric is a variable, but look at there. My V's are forming perfectly on the bottom side like it did on my sample, and my lower looper, which strangely enough is showing up on the upper side of the fabric. That's what a 2-thread does. When you stitch with a 2-thread and it's balanced, your needle thread is going to show on the lower side and your lower looper is going to show on the upper side. So let's do just another little tweak here. Let's increase that needle tension and see what happens. I'm going to go just a little bit more. All right. Well, it's still pretty good. So that tells me that I could use anywhere from a 0 to maybe a 1 and still have good results because my lower looper is set well. How do you know generally when a tension is too tight? Very simply, when a tension is too tight, let's go ahead and tighten that lower looper really high. When a tension is too tight, it pulls to the side where it doesn't belong. So you could see my lower looper thread, which is navy, is actually pulling to the top side. And as it's pulling, it's yanking that needle thread along with it. So when the tension is too tight, it pulls to a side where it doesn't belong. When the tension is too loose, let's go really loose on here. I'll just scoot on this end here. When the tension is too loose, it can also pull to the wrong side. So it's all about balancing, and check your tensions one at a time, but always start with that recommended range. If you start in the recommended range, you're not going to be so far off the beaten path that everything's going to be out of kilter. Okay? Sometimes also when your needle tension is too loose, it just plain and simply looks sloppy. Another tip for the day, if you heard me say this before, I prefer not to cut my serger tails. I see some people doing this where they will cut it with the with the blade. I like to save that blade for cutting fabric, not thread. Thread is pretty tough, and your blade will last longer and stay sharper if you don't use the blade to cut. And then also you have a cutter on the top side of your machine. Very convenient, and I'm not saying not to use it, but I tend to use cheap, inexpensive scissors. And when I'm cutting threads that are going to possibly dull that, I don't worry about it that way. All right, so next on my list, we've done that, we've done that. Okay, now we are going to go ahead and we're going to switch the foot real quick here. And we are going to do, in the last few minutes that we have here, some flat locking. So you've seen me do edging with a 2-thread stitch. A 2-thread stitch is the easiest and best setting for a flat lock. What is a flat lock? A flat lock is done on an edge, of course. Remember, it's all about edges, but that edge could be a folded edge, or it could be 2 edges of fabric together, and then it's a flat lock because we open it up and it stays flat and it locks those 2 edges together, or just forms that decorative look. So this is a stitch that many want to do, and sometimes struggle with getting it properly done. So I want to give you some clues on how to best perfect this stitch, and then show you some different samples of how you might use it. All right, I'm checking my notes here. So again, I'm just going to show you just a few samples first, and then we're going to go ahead and stitch these. So a flat lock could be done on the fold of the fabric, or it could be done with 2 raw edges, so that when we open it up and it lays flat, those 2 raw edges are joined together by the 2 pieces facing each other. And this is a really strong stitch. The thing you want to remember is this should only be done on fabric that does not fray. So I've got a French terry knit here. And why do we want to do it on a fabric that doesn't fray? Because these edges here that are not really good for you to be able to see, but trust me, they're there. If I poke this through there, that is 2 raw edges butted up together. And if that was a fabric that raveled, this is eventually going to fray out, and this could pull apart. Because the knit doesn't ravel, it will not pull apart. So let me tell you, first of all, how I prepare this. If you've ever sewn with knits, and in particular jersey style knits, what you see is the edges curl. So look at that. My edges start to curl. And if I'm going to try to do a flat lock on there, and I've got 2 edges that they're curling, I'm going to have trouble keeping those edges together. So my first recommendation is you take fusible interfacing. I like the knitted style. This is also available as a product that we use for embroidery when you want to cover up your stitches. So that it's a tricot knitted type interfacing, and it's very light, very soft, has a little bit of stretch, but it stabilizes those edges. So if I'm going to flat lock 2 edges together, I'm going to fuse a strip to the wrong side, and you could see that has totally, completely cured the curling. So that is my first recommendation. I like to use a strip about 1 inch wide. You may not need it quite that wide, but that just kind of, firms that up in that area, but doesn't really change the character of the fabric. So that's step 1. So what is step 2? Step 2 is getting the machine set up for flat locking. We could flat lock with a standard ordinary presser foot, but this is where the blind hem foot shines as a bright star in the universe, because this makes the task so much easier and so much more foolproof. The reason is, you'll see as I stitch this, when you do a flat lock, in order to get it to lay flat, the first rule is your stitches, when they're forming, should form about half on the fabric and half off. And you will see that in just a second here. And in order to do that properly, it's really hard to keep things lined up. The blind hem foot is designed for blind hemming, which we'll do a blind hem too, but it has a guide that moves, and that moves from right to left. I've got it set up perfectly, which you'll see in a minute here, to do a flat lock. And I think this will all make sense in a minute. So snap on the foot. Remember the trick. I will repeat my tricks from time to time. If your foot is not quite locked on, reach back to the little clamp and press the same clamp that you would normally use to release the foot, and it will open that little clamp a little bit more. And if you're close but not quite on, it will click. All right. So again, I'm going to go back to the settings that I found were preferable. Needle thread at 0, lower looper at 7. And I've got my 2 raw edges here. Okay. I want it to finish like this, which is exactly what I have here, except with the stitch covering it. And this does mimic a cover hem, by the way. So that's kind of interesting. For many years, I used this stitch before I had a cover hem machine. So in order for these two to join up here with the flat lock forming, we're going to stitch with the wrong sides together. Now, when you do a flat lock, there are 2 sides to a flat lock. There is the loopy side, and there is what's known as the ladder side. The ladder side can be featured on the top or on the bottom. If you want your flat lock to finish with the ladders on the top side, you are going to put right sides together. So if I wanted my ladders to be featured, I'm going to put, you know what, I'm going to cut this in half and I'm going to show you both. We can do both of them here. So ideally, these scissors are great for cutting thread, but they're not great for cutting anything else. But they're cheap, and I don't mind it when they wear out and they won't cut. They won't cut anymore. It's not going to bother me. Okay, so if we put right sides together, we're going to get the ladder showing on the right side or the top side. If we put wrong sides together, we're going to get the loop. So we'll do one at a time, and I'll show you here. So we'll start with right sides. And where do I have my foot set? I have it set so that as the needle bites the fabric and the loops form on the stitch finger, I get about half of the stitch forming on the fabric and half of the stitch forming on mid-air. That is the best setting for flat lock. Why is that the best setting? Because it allows you to pull your fabric and have it lay perfectly flat. You could still do this and have it run all the way to the edge, but when you pull your fabric, you will have a bump or a hump right there. If you want to use that as a textured effect, fine. But usually we want a flat lock to be perfectly flat and smooth. So by setting this, I've already got it preset so that my stitch is going to form half on and half off. Excuse me, 1 sec. I'm going to take a quick sip of water here. And that's going to allow me to pull that fabric and have it lay flat and smooth. Now, what if you don't have a blind hem foot? Well, you know, I'm all about options. If you don't have a blind hem foot, you could put a marking on your machine. So a simple piece of painter's tape or a Post-it note. You could certainly use a Post-it note temporarily. And once you've got it set so that you know where that fabric edge should be for half on to for half to be on and half to be off, then you would just simply guide the raw edge of your fabric right along that edge. Just a word of caution, Post-it notes come off very easily. Tape, even if it's supposedly low tack, will sometimes leave a residue. So I would not recommend leaving this on your machine for any length of time. You could also do both. So if you do have a blind hem foot, put that guideline there. So that helps me keep straight for a longer distance. And the straighter I am, the more consistent my stitches will be. All right, let me show you how this works. And when I'm stitching this, once I've got it set so that it's biting half on and leaving half off, I am no longer going to watch that needle. I'm going to watch this edge guide and this edge guide here, and that's going to keep me consistent. It's always best to sew a little slower when you're doing some sort of a decorative technique, because when you speed up, you tend to get a little sloppy. All right, so if we look at this, I think you can see that. I'm going to just pull a little bit of it with my screwdriver here. So you can see those loops are hanging off. So I've got half the width of the stitch is in midair and half of the stitch is biting the fabric. So again, I've got right sides together. When I pull this with right sides together, I get the ladder on the outside. I get the loops on the inside. So again, personal preference. That has a very hand look. It also is ideal for adding ribbon embellishments. So take a look at this. I have threaded a tapestry needle and I can weave that. So for a decorative effect, I can go one up, skip one, and I can weave that ribbon right through. Don't get lost as far as what you're skipping, or you'll have to pull it out and do it over again. And look at how beautiful that is as a decorative effect. I could, of course, use a contrast effect, but I will tell you that the 1/8 inch wide ribbon works perfectly for this technique. Okay, now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to do wrong sides together. Check myself. Yep. Wrong sides together. Right sides together for ladder. Wrong sides together for loops. So this would give, and you can see really, really well how those stitches are hanging off. When we pull this flat, I've got that loop effect. Sometimes you're going to just, pull your threads just a little bit, straighten them out a little bit. And obviously, if I were using all matching thread, that's going to blend right in. So consider that as well. And then there's my ladders there. Okay, so that's a traditional flat lock. We could also do that on a folded edge. So I'm just going to take that same fabric. I'm going to fold it. And if you remember, I said that my blade was still in cutting position. Having this guide on the blind hem foot or a guide on your machine, we're stitching half on and half off. We are quite a distance from that blade. If you think you might accidentally swing and sway while you're stitching, you don't want to take the risk of having your fabric jam. I would rather ruin a piece of fabric by having it get cut than I would have it jam my machine. However, if you line it up this way and you use a guide and you stay consistent, you don't have to deal with that blade at all. Yes, I could lower it if I want to. The main thing you always want to remember, whenever you lower your blade, do something to tell you that that has been done. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. Whenever you lower your blade, do something to tell you that that has been done. One of my favorite things to do is to, again, simply take a Post-it note and I will just write on here, blade down, exclamation point. I will stick that on the front of my machine in a place where I can see it. just going to go down there so you can see what I'm doing here. And that is basically going to function as a red flag warning system, because I'm going to likely switch to something that I do need it to cut, and I don't want to risk having that blade in the wrong position. All right, so we're going to do this on the fold, and then we're going to do 2 more things with the same stitch. Now notice that everything has been done with the same stitch setting that I did here. So a balanced 2-thread stitch will allow you to do a beautiful, beautiful flat lock that can be done all the different ways that I'm showing you. There we go. So in this case, I did not use it to join fabric. I only used it to accent my fabric. And there you go. I could pull that perfectly flat. The other advantage is, because this stitch is made up of loops, is it does have a little bit of give, so it can stretch and it can flex. It's really, really a fun technique. So either to join 2 pieces or to simply accent a fabric is what we've done so far. Now, what about joining lace to fabric? I've got that same silky satiny fabric, and this fabric ravels. So if the fabric ravels, we're going to want to do it on a fold. I have a piece of lace. Lace doesn't ravel, so I can put these 2 together. And again, I want to do it so the ladders show on the outside. So lace doesn't always have a very definite right and wrong, but this one is a little bumpy on the right side. And then I've got that nice scallop finish. So this could be used for heirloom effects. Again, same stitch setting. So I'm going to do the same thing I did when I did those 2 raw edges together. And remember, it sometimes is going to help you to raise your presser foot a little and just get the edge of the fabric underneath there, especially when it's slippery and it wants to slide. Okay, same exact technique, half on, half off. No trimming. All right, when I pull this open, I have a beautifully joined piece of lace to fabric. And then if I want to further accent that, I can do the same technique I did before by weaving that ribbon underneath there. So that is lace to fabric. How beautiful is that? And on that, I usually prefer, although the loopy side's pretty too, if you've got pretty color thread in there, but I usually prefer for this technique to have the ladders showing on top. I think it just has more of an heirloom look, and it actually looks like it was stitched by hand. All right, one last thing we're going to do with this flat lock is we are going to hem a t-shirt. So I'm going to show you a finished sample of that. And that is a flat lock hem. Now, one of the first things you want to realize with this is that the stitches are going to show. No matter what you do, the stitches are going to show at least a little bit. The further we move it away so that less fabric is being caught, so we have more fabric on, more stitches rather on air, the smaller our stitch will be, but it is always going to show a little bit. So to me, that can be done as a decorative effect. So there's my hem. All right, let's talk about prepping. Once again, I have prepped my hem with that same beautiful piece of fusible interfacing, fusible tricot style knitted interfacing, cut in a 1-inch strip. That does a couple things for me. Number one, it stabilizes that raw edge, makes everything work smoother. It still stretches, so I'm not losing the stretchability. It also gives me a defined 1-inch hem. So once I've fused that, that would normally be along the raw edge. I'm a little further off than that, but you get the picture there. Then I can fold it up to the wrong side right along that fused piece. And I do this for almost all of my hemming, no matter what I'm doing. I usually will try to fuse a piece of appropriate interfacing so that it doesn't change the character of the fabric, so that when I do my hem, I've got a little bit of extra body, a little bit of extra security there. All right, now the next step after we fold that hem up, same thing is the way we do it on a sewing machine. We need to then fold the hem back on itself. So the outside of the hem is touching the outside of the garment. And when we stitch it, we need it to stitch. So I'm going to flip around. So again, hem is folded up, and then outside of the hem is touching the outside of the garment with a little bit extending there. I want about 1/8 of an inch extending. I'm using the same setting. And in this case, though, my guide is going to be right along that fold. So I may be skimming, go just a little bit in. So you can see me adjusting that. And I may be skimming just a little bit of the raw edge of the fabric. That's okay. That's a little bit of an extension. Go just a little narrower there, a little closer to the needle. You don't really need as much of the stitch on air when you do a blind hem, because a lot of that stitch is going to form on that double folded layer of fabric. So it helps eat up the stitch a little bit more. I love how quiet this machine is too. All right, so that's what it looks like before we pull it and lay it flat. Look at that. How beautiful is that? Quick press, and we've got a beautiful flat hem. We've got a little bit of a decorative effect, or we have thread that blends in if we use matching thread. And we still have that stretchability because it's a loopy stitch. All right, that is it for today as far as techniques. I'm going to slide back over here, and now is the time to get your questions in. Whew, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a lot. I know it was a lot. Okay, so I'm going to double back here a little bit, and look for the question marks. Oh, Shirley asks, has anyone here got this machine as an upgrade from the Brother 1034D? I can speak to this personally because I had that machine, and it was fine. It's a budget model machine. It's an entry-level machine. It's perfectly fine. This particular airflow machine is like, it's like going from cubic zirconia to a diamond. That is the difference. Well worth the upgrade if you can do that. I think it's well worth the upgrade. Cindy says, "Are you turning a dial?" I probably did turn dial. I turned tension dials that you couldn't see because I wanted you to be up close. Catfish doesn't jump out of the water. Thank you, Heidi. So we can call that one the catfish. Let's see. Joanne, you are welcome for the demo. Scrolling through to find a question. Okay, that one wasn't for me. Oh yeah. I see some good tips were in here. Nail polish remover can be dangerous for sure. Oh, Cindy, we'll do corners next time. Okay, I promise. When we do the decorative thing, we will do corners. Diane says, are stretch needles needed? Terrific question, Diane. Generally, no. On a serger, we use universal needles. We use anywhere from a size 11 to a 14. Personally, I never go smaller than an 11, and I never go larger than a 14. The main thing with needles is you always want to use the needles that are recommended for your particular serger. One of the things, again, I love about this machine is it uses standard Schmetz needles. So a universal Schmetz needle will work on this machine. You can switch it up. Next month, little sneak preview, I am going to be using a top stitch needle. So as long as it's the same needle system and anywhere from 11 to a 14, you are good to go. A universal needle is perfectly suitable for wovens, and yet it's gentle enough to be done on knits. Sergers form a stitch so different than a sewing machine does that on a sewing machine, it's very helpful with knits to have a stretch needle. A serger, I have never found that to be necessary, but that is a terrific, terrific question. Marcia wants to know, do you recommend the two-thread overcast to take care of fraying fabric? Yes, absolutely. However, remember, the more thread that's in the stitches, the more security you get. So if your fabric falls apart by simply sneezing on it or looking at it, then you might want to use a 3-thread edge finish instead of a 2-thread. 2-thread is lighter, and unless your fabric, like I said, really falls apart, your 2-thread is probably going to be an ideal choice. But the more threads that are in that stitch, the more coverage that you get. All right, Fuzzy Face Place Leah says she always learns. Thank you. That means so much to me because that's why I'm here and that's why I'm doing it. Kathleen wants to know another great question for the metallic threads. Do you use a metallic needle? Generally, I say no. On the serger, I don't. It doesn't mean you can't. If your serger allows you to use standard needles and not a specialty needle, you could then use that specialty needle with that specialty thread. It's different than decorative stitching and it's different than embroidering. I find a metallic needle is generally more necessary on a sewing machine when you're doing decorative stitching or embroidery. All right. I don't see any more questions. If you haven't, oh, okay, Doris, you stuck in there. How would the lace applicator foot work with the Flatlock? Um, I don't know exactly what a lace applicator foot is. I'm going to guess that in the past, when I've used a cover hem machine, a lace applicator foot was actually a foot for a cover hem machine for applying lace to an edge, again, as a top stitch, not as an edge stitch. So when you're doing lace application, which is what we did here, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? It is a beautiful thing. I use the blind hem foot simply to keep me lined up on the straight and narrow. I could have used a standard foot, and as long as I had a marking or a guideline on my machine to keep me consistent, I would have been good. Shirley says, what needle for the rolled hem? Whatever you're doing with a rolled hem is almost always going to be on a lightweight fabric because you will not get a rolled hem on firm fabric. You will only get a rolled hem on lightweight soft fabric. And I do have a whole show that we're going to do on rolling with the rolled hem. Okay, so watch for that. Lots and lots and lots of goodies in that one. But because I would be generally doing that on a lightweight fabric, I'm going to use the smallest needle, which is going to be an 11. Remember that the reason we use 11, this is very important. So this is another tip of the day. The reason we use nothing smaller than an 11 or nothing larger than a 14 on a serger, generally, there may be some exceptions to that if your machine allows you to do that, but generally 11 to 14 is because 11 is fine enough to not poke a big hole, but not so fine or so slim that it's weak. And when you're doing serging, you're doing a lot of stitching. There's a lot of movement going on there. So a little difference with that needle. If it's an 8 or a 10, it could more easily break. Why don't we use anything larger than a 14? Great question. The answer is anything larger could affect the timing of the machine. There's a very intricate dance that goes on between the needles, the upper looper, and the lower looper. If I had another hand here, I could do all three at once. There's a very intricate sequence that happens with that. And if your needle is too big, and you pull your fabric a little ways, one way or the other, that needle could end up bumping into something that it shouldn't. So your sergers are tuned for 11 to 14. All right, Shirley, you are welcome. I think remember, a little bird told me I had birds out there chirping. I was afraid you were gonna hear the birds chirping out there today. A little bird told me that Sewing Machines Plus, ha ha, there it is. Call in special for the Brother Airflow 3000. That is a great, great, great price for a great, great, great machine. I wholeheartedly, if you can jump into it sooner rather than later. You will not be sorry. You will love that machine. All right. Thank you so much. We are ready to say goodbye. And Cody is the sweet sorrow. I love spending time with all of you, and I can't wait until we spend time together again. All right. We'll see you soon. Until then, happy sewing. Love to all of you. Bye bye.